The turn of the 20th century was an exciting time to be in film, as many of the emerging art forms' initial technological hardships had been worked through. This allowed documentary film production to flourish, transforming the medium into an expression of a desire to record the truth in an unmediated manner in order to facilitate the dissemination of information in the rapidly developing global arena. In these early stages, the forms and conventions of the genre were not yet solidified, and everyone was still learning from one another. So, for example, the documentary efforts in, say, Japan in 1939 were actually informed by the fascist German aesthetics of 1937, and so on. While some of these documentary efforts maintained their purely artistic qualities, many filmmakers were inspired by the desire to enact social change through the use of the emerging medium. After Flaherty released Nanook of the North, a feature-length, pseudo-ethnographic documentary reenactment of sorts, it gained massive praise, and people finally began to realize documentary's potential for pushing the boundaries of filmmaking in its portrayal of the real. At this time, individuals such as Flaherty himself, John Grierson, Pare Lorentz, and Leni Riefenstahl had to deal with the realities and aftermaths of the global economic crisis. And it was hard to come by funding for, quote, art for art's sake, not to mention the unstable and increasingly fascistic political regimes of many of Europe's cultural hubs, think Germany and Italy, which made it next to impossible to disseminate any work not censored by an oppressive regime. This led to a bridge between documentary filmmaking and government agencies, in the form of sponsorship and art propaganda committees, the major players in this field being the United Kingdom, the United States, and Germany. One of the most influential documentary filmmakers of the early 20th century was John Grierson. Born in 1898 in Glasgow, Scotland, Grierson was one of the few filmmakers that was not shy of using the word propaganda. In fact, Grierson believed that propaganda was an essential function of filmmaking, and upon graduating film school, promptly went to work in 1927 with the Empire Marketing Board, an organization intended to cement the prestige of the British Empire through the dissemination of propaganda. Grierson believed that filmmaking was the next step in a natural progression for the Empire Marketing Board, and after leading production on the board's first film, Drifters, an in-depth look into the UK's herring fishing industry in 1929, he was lauded for his unobtrusive documentary style, imaginative editing techniques, and the dignity with which he portrayed the working class. After internalizing the positive response from Drifters, and I guess as a personal congratulations of sorts, Grierson promoted himself to be the creative organizer of the Empire Marketing Board's filmmaking department, where he managed both the negotiations for private and government sponsorships, as well as oversaw all ongoing projects, including such seminal state-sponsored films as Housing Problems, Coalface, Song of Ceylon, and Night Mail, all of which solidified Grierson's unique interview and editing style within the forms and conventions of the documentary genre, and impacted the larger socio-cultural climate of the early to mid-20th century. Grierson was able to realize documentary's propagandistic potential through institutionalization, and by telling stories that hit the general population at home, as in really at home, in their own country and own community, was able to achieve his goal of, quote, educating the nation's citizenship towards a richer and fuller life, which can be seen as a nationalist sentiment left over from World War I. In the United States, filmmakers emerging in the 1930s, such as Pare Lorentz, offered to bring the spectacle of Hollywood to the realities of the everyday subject. And although the relationship between the government and Hollywood was widely questioned in the United States for being a socialist arrangement, Lorentz, with shocking, expository films such as The Plow That Broke the Plains and The River, asserted that there was in fact a powerful message to tell within the United States through the documentary medium. Like Grierson, Lorentz was interested in exposing the horrors of poverty and failed intervention on everyday citizens, and his films often explored themes of tragedy and the lingering effects of social, political, and economic upheaval. Both The Plow That Broke the Plains and The River, while not overtly political, provided the American public with a harrowing picture of reality with which to compare the bright new future promised by President Roosevelt and his New Deal for Reconstruction, which effectively made both of these films propaganda for his administration within his many terms. In Germany at the time, Filmmakers interested in producing or distributing their works on a wide scale did not have to respond to the same social or economic conditions of those of the UK or the US. Rather, artists of all kinds were forcefully ripped from the country's artistic golden age of the 1920s and thrust into the strict censorship within the emerging fascist regime, headed by Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Popular Enlightenment and Propaganda under Adolf Hitler himself. One of the only filmmakers awarded the ability to produce works throughout the Third Reich was Leni Riefenstahl, an avant-garde, sexually liberated dancer and model turned filmmaker who popularized the German genre of the mountain film before agreeing to produce a politicized documentary surrounding Hitler's week-long 1934 party rally in Nuremberg. The film, titled Triumph of the Will, and Leni's follow-up film documenting the 1936 Summer Olympics titled Olympia, were both stunning displays of technological innovation in terms of the sheer number of new camera tracks, dollies, and aerial rigs invented to fulfill Riefenstahl's vision, as well as majorly influential in asserting the international prowess of both individual German bodies and Hitler's Third Reich as a whole. These early documentary films, though sponsored by government organizations and therefore technically propaganda, can be watched independently and revered for their gripping narratives and pioneering in the work of observational cinema. For example, many of the techniques in documenting crowds and the careful tracking of bodies by the camera pioneered by Leni Riefenstahl can be seen today in the coverage of athletic events, concerts, political rallies, protests, and other televised stories, and the informatory style of Pare Lorentz went on to shift the atmosphere surrounding news reporting, reflected in the Academy Award-winning program The March of Time. While one cannot ignore the massive impact of these political documentaries on the propagation of the genre, I do believe it is worth asking ourselves a couple of questions. If the genre of documentary was conceived and fostered not only from a place of art, but also from a place of cajoling those in power and placating those aiming to change the framing of the truth. What does this mean for documentary when truth is the one claim that it has? When some historians claim that all documentary is propaganda, can the genre still make a truth claim? Can it even make an artistic claim?